So tell your partner what you perceive, and then before you swallow it, unblock your nose and identify. So when you have your nose blocked, you should only be able to perceive taste and textural sensations, but not the smell by mouth.
That was really interesting.
So when we have it cold, we can taste things as sweet, but we can't get the aroma. So it's quite an important component of flavour is our sense of smell. When the substance enters your mouth, we have a salivary pH ranges from about 5 to 7. So then something smelling out of your mouth, when you actually put it in your mouth, can smell quite different because of the pH change. The others who spoke before me spoke about Dr. Ikeda identifying the fifth taste of umami almost 100 years ago now, but it's only really been recently recognised in Western culture that we have this fifth taste. And initially it was indicated that there might be a fifth taste because the four tastes combined together couldn't elicit this taste of umami. But what really clinched the deal was in 2000 there was a group in Miami who actually identified this metabotropic glutamate receptor 4, which is specific for glutamate. And since then there have been a number of other receptors that have also identified. So scientifically this evidence convinced the Western world that there is this fifth taste of umami. And the other piece of evidence that indicates that umami is a taste is that it is able to stimulate the taste nerves, including the chorda tympani nerve and also the glossopharyngeal nerve. So we've got another little exercise. A teaspoonful of the umami solution in 1 cup, and then a teaspoon of the salt in the other cup. And I think it's been made quite clear tonight that describing the sensory attributes of umami is quite hard, and it sounds like it's also the same in Japanese culture as well. It's hard to describe, but it's commonly translated as meaning savoury, delicious. Unlike sweet and salt, over quite quickly after you ingest it, the taste of bitter lingers for quite some time, and so does umami. Kumiko talked about the synergism between the glutamates and the 5' nucleotides to impart this taste of umami, but there's other studies that have shown that when they use glutamate, if it's subjects are asked to rate the intensity of the umami taste. If it's done in addition with a savoury odour, whether it be, for example, garlic or onion, that the rating for umami is actually higher in the presence of that savoury odour. So usually with salt, it is quite immediate, and the perception of where we perceive salt can be quite different. So the others have also alluded to umami being found in a number of different sources, including parmesan and cured meats, and you saw the great tomato demonstration first up. It's also in smoked fish and mushrooms. But our group is doing some ongoing research in Indigenous bush foods, and in particular we're looking at the Australian bush tomatoes. These are also called the desert raisin or desert tomato. They're from the Solanum family, so they are related to our common garden tomato that we looked at earlier on, and also to they have high amounts of solanine, which is that toxic compound that you get in green potatoes. So they are naturally occurring in central South Australia, Northern Territory and Western Australia, and they grow in these quite attractive prickly little bushes with pink to purple tomato flowers they have a habit of around about 250 to 500 mils high and wide. They're very drought tolerant. They don't mind salty conditions, so they're quite tough little bushes. And after ripening, the fruits begin to raisin, and hence, I guess, the name desert raisin. And that's when they're usually picked by the indigenous people, and they're ground and also used to make cakes, and they've been traded in the past. And they have a quite a unique, pungent, piquant flavour and taste. They have a very earthy tomato characteristic and paprika. So there should be some bowls of bush tomato dukkha that have come around. Now this is a prototype product. It's not made in a commercial kitchen, so don't be too harsh on it, but it is based on an Egyptian dukkha, which is crushed almonds and sesame seed and some spice, but then we've mixed it with some ground Australian bush tomato. So hopefully you can dip some of the bread in some oil. So can you taste some umami in the bush tomato? It's what do you think of the taste and flavour? Quite unique. Yeah, you like that? It's quite bitter. Yes, I agree. So I think we've got a lot of untapped resources with the indigenous foods that we do have here. We know that these bush tomatoes will probably have some definite health benefits. We're not sure of the glutamate levels as yet. That's, as I said, it's ongoing research, so we hope to look at that. Okay, so I now want to focus on wine and umami, and I think anecdotally I've been trying wines and tasting a large number of wines for many years, and I think particularly from the old world we see a lot of wines that do seem to have a savoury characteristic to them. They have more herbal dried flower characteristics, in contrast to the wines that are coming out of the New World, Australia being a New World producer where they are quite fruit forward and fruit driven. So I tried to look at the current literature on wine and umami, and there's basically nothing. However, there was a group in France in 2001 that used Chardonnay, and interestingly they call it industrial Chardonnay, and they use various techniques to isolate small peptides. Now peptides are fragments of proteins, or they're, if you like, they're amino acids which are the building blocks of protein, which glutamate is one, which are added together and to make these small peptides. And this particular group was isolating peptides of even only 3 amino acids, so very small compounds. They're occurring in wine probably at such low levels that you wouldn't detect umami taste in wine. So what this group did was they synthesised these small peptides and then in larger amounts and reconstituted them in water, and found that they did have this umami taste. So I think the future for umami and wine is really looking at whether the consumption of umami-rich foods and will alter the perception of wine, and whether there is any sort of synergistic interaction between wines and these umami-rich foods as well. Anyway, I think it'll be quite an enjoyable experiment to conduct. So that brings me to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which was wine and food matching.